At this time, we're going to go to 11.0, which is our superintendent's report. And from this point forward until we adjourn, board, this is for information only. We will not be taking any more votes tonight except to adjourn. So, Dr. Little, I'm going to turn it over to you for the second reading of the 2019-2020 general fund budget. Dr. Little?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and just jump right into the budget. So, Mr. Butler, I believe you have a presentation and some things for us for the second reading.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Little. This is our second reading of our 2019-20 fiscal year for our general operating budget. A lot of these slides you've seen before. I won't spend a lot of time on those, but we do have some changes, and I'll try to go through those. So operating budget, which is what our general fund budget is for the day-to-day operational revenues and expenses. Examples of some of these things are salaries, printing and binding, advertisements, rentals, travel, professional and technical services, supplies, materials, IT software, dues and fees, et cetera, any operational cost. On the other hand, our capital budget is restricted by law, bond covenants. Did I hit something? Oh. And accounting principles to use for buildings and equipment. So some of the examples, other than buildings and equipment, we can use it to buy buses, library books, band instruments and uniforms, those types of things. But the main point here is the capital budget or capital funds cannot be used for operating expenses.
Can I clarify one thing, Mr. Butler? I think there is some confusion out in the community. I think sometimes I've read where people think that, you know, maybe we could not build a school and we could take that money and give the teachers a raise. But by law, when the community votes on a bond referendum and authorizes for us to build a building, we're not allowed to take that money and use it for salaries.
Yeah, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, when they pass a referendum, we have to list in there exactly what the expenditures are, and we're restricted to just those expenditures. Right. Even if some other capital needs come up, we're still restricted to those expenditures. So our projection for enrollment next year, about 500 new students, 511. That's pretty close to what we grew this year. So some considerations for the budget was to meet mandatory expenditures without sufficient state funding to meet those expenditures. And I'll show you some of that later. Provide for student growth, meet state and federal requirements, meet inflationary costs, things like utilities, insurance, et cetera. Ensure quality and support for students and staff. We did have a change on this slide, priorities for the 2019-20 budget. We still have on that drive to 35, the state mandated 4% certified salary increase. The next two highlighted in green there are new. The first reading did not have a percent increase for support or administrative. So in this second reading, we have a 2% support staff salary increase and a 1% administrative salary increase. Now we also have in here a step increase for all eligible certified support and administrative employees. We'll be opening Beechwood Middle School, to supplemental student support and maintain current class ratios. So the class ratios, one of Dr. Little's initiatives when he came here was to lower class ratios, especially in the early years. So you can see in 2016 what our ratios were there, 24 to 26 to 1. So by 17-18, when Dr. Little came, we were able to make first and second grade 22 to 1. Now, the other grades stayed the same. In the current year, 18-19, we were able to go to 22 to 1 in kindergarten, first and second grade. And the proposed budget next year, we're still targeting 22 to 1 for kindergarten, first and second, and then reducing fourth and fifth grade from 26 to 25 to 1. Another
Can you go
one
back
of,
to that slide just a second, because I just want to make sure the board is clear on this one. In 18-19, or actually in 17-18, I guess, is where we used some of those pool positions to reduce it. As the year went on, some of those numbers then went up, right? See what I'm saying? So you started the year with that, and then it moved up. This is the year that we've started, and that's where we want to really hold tight on that 22 to 1, right, and 25 to 1.
and the same thing kind of happened in the current year, 18-19 with kindergarten, targeting 22 to 1. But as the year progressed and we grew in enrollment in those areas, some classes did exceed the 22 to 1.
Do you know what the numbers were in those classes?
I mean, it depends on, every class is not the same. Some classes may have 20, some may have 22. Occasionally we get one to 23. We can get you that data on what they are.
I was just wondering if you had an average, kind of like what was here.
Are you asking about kindergarten?
Well, just in general, when it says some classes exceeded, I figured if it was written here, then you that maybe had that data somewhere.
I pulled the numbers this afternoon for kindergarten. So this year's kindergarten, we started at 22 to 1. And then as the year progressed, schools like Forts Pond Elementary right now are 23.5 to 1. Gilbert Primary is 24.9 to 1. Lexington Elementary is 25.25 to 1. Pillion Elementary is 23.75 to 1. So if we were staffed at 22 to 1 at the start of the year, what would happen is typically the principals would be on my case, making sure I knew that their numbers had gone above 22.5, and we'd be adding a kindergarten teacher and an instructional assistant. So that means that if we were staffed at 22 to 1 at the beginning of this year, we would have had to hire 5 more kindergarten teachers and an instructional assistant. So the budget is saying that next year we're going to be staffed at 22 to 1. So as those kindergarten numbers grow at each school, principals like Margaret Mitchum will be on me every day to let me know how many kindergarten teachers, students she has, so I can. And there's some other principals out here that are just as bad, but they won't let it get past 22 to 1. But that's kind of what we did. We used pool positions to get them down. Like this year, what happened at the beginning of the year, like a week before school started, we recognized if we took 3 pool positions and strategically placed them in kindergarten, and Rocky Creek was an example of someone that was lower, we were able to take a teacher and move them from Rocky Creek to Gilbert Primary, and that started everybody at 22 to 1, but they kind of creep up because people move in and have kindergarten. Does that help?
Oh, yeah, that answers it. Thank you.
When we look at the projected growth, and say it's 550, 575 a year, do they then stratify that to the ages to say we expect of that 575 that 60% of those are elementary school, so that way we can kind of know to maintain pace in terms of our hires and accounting for that in the budget, so on and so forth?
When they provide the projections, they do it by grade, and so then we use these staffing numbers to try to staff by grade.
Gotcha.
It's actually by grade, by individual school.
And so that's taking into account those projections of growth for this upcoming budget year, school year? Yes. Gotcha. Thank you.
I knew we had the information, I just didn't know we were going to get it that quick. Whoops. So another initiative of Dr. Little was not only to reduce class size, but to raise teacher salaries. He called it Drive to 35, where the goal was to raise the starting salary with a teacher with a bachelor's with no experience, which is our lower cell on the teacher salary schedule, up to $35,000, while at the same time increasing all teacher salaries accordingly. So in 15-16, we were at $32,161, 16-17 went to 32,804. And you can see it went to 33,132. This year it became 33,795. And next year we're projecting to fund that lowest cell at 35,991. So instead of drive to 35, it became arrived at 35. It's actually almost 36,000. So. This represents the changes from first reading to second. Couple of things, major things here was we really wanted to accomplish a couple of things. We wanted to decrease our dependency on fund balance, and I'll go into more detail on that in just a little bit. So we went through and kind of tightened our budget, seeing where we might be able to reduce some of our budgets. So in accounts payable, we went through and reduced some utilities, some communications, repairs and maintenance, insurance and supplies to the tune of about $1.25 million. We also reduced our contingency fund by $2 million. And I know some people think, well, why do you need a contingency? Well, the next line might be a good example, because the start of the year, the state said that we were going to have an increase in employee health insurance. Well, then after we put first reading together, PIBA, who manages the health insurance, come out and said no, that we would not have an employer health insurance increase. So we were able to reduce that by $656,000. But let's say the state comes back and says, oh, you know what, we were wrong. We really have to increase that employer health insurance. Well, without that contingency, we would have nowhere to go to get that money. So that's what that's for.
Is that contingency, is there a line item for contingency, or is it embedded within each?
It's embedded in the accounts.
Within each account, it's embedded?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha.
And then, like I said, we added a 2% increase for support staff and 1 increase for administrative staff, tune of about $1.2 million. We're going through the process and looking at our enrollment projections again, and also seeing where students were enrolling and registering. We actually added 12 new FTE, which 8 of those are certified and 4 support, 738,000. We did make some few minor adjustments, about 9,400. So as you can see, we actually reduced the budget in second reading by right around $2 million. So in our budget, these are the increases in our certified staff: 7 new elementary school, 29.8 new middle school teachers and licensed professionals, 9.5 high school certified and licensed professionals. One thing that we found out is that we really needed to staff our special needs classes up front, because the trouble we ran into as students move into the area with special needs, and there are quite a few of them during the year. So we added 17.8 special needs certified and licensed professionals, and then we do have 5 pool positions. One thing I would like to see us work on would be possible to get more pool positions for third reading, but we've already made this budget about as thin as we can, so we'll wait and see. So startup cost, whoops, I skipped the page. Okay, so this is the cost excluding Beechwood, and then the Lexington and Pleasant Hill Middle Schools that'll be feeding Beechwood. So this is basically kind of what our normal growth would be. Certified and licensed professional staff, 43.3. support staff 1.7, central services administrative staff actually a -3, and that would be my position since I will be retiring next month. Our director of accounting, and then also a director in communications department. We're adding 1 school administrative staff, and then we do have some supplements, additional days, and temporary salaries. The majority of that really falls under about 3 categories, increasing special ed IAs from 7 to 7.5 hours, third year increase in athletic supplements, and then comparing ourselves to our psychologist salaries to neighboring districts, we found out that we were behind just about every district. So we're proposing adding an additional $5,000 stipend to all psychologists. Currently it's $3,000, so this additional 5 would make it $8,000.
Dr. Talley, could you and Mr. Butler talk about the IA increase in hours, where that came from?
Yeah, with the special needs students, you just can't turn them loose and tell them go get on the bus, or turn them loose, go get in the car. Whether that's coming or going, they're getting out of the car, they're getting out of the buses, they need help. So that extra half hour provides a little bit of time before and after school to help those students get in and out of the school was the main reason for that.
I would just add to that, I would give our principals, who are fabulous, a lot of credit for that. We started getting calls in the fall. They had some instructional assistants who were on 7.5 hours, and then others on 8 hours, and there was some inconsistency. And we, as John said, you know, our focus is on the safety of children and taking care of children, so we needed to make that consistent. So, and when people stay an extra 30 minutes, they need to be paid for that. So we're just trying to clean that up a little bit, because there's a need.
So the total net, excluding Beechwood, was 43 staff members at about 3.4 million. And then we talked about excluding Beechwood. If you look at just the startup costs for Beechwood, that's 86 positions, about $5.7 million. And then as the students move from Lexington Middle and Pleasant Hill Middle, some of the staff will go with them. So that's 17.1 from Lexington Middle and 34.35 from Pleasant Hill Middle that will be going with those students to Beechwood. So the net increase is actually 34.55 at 2.3 million. And then Beechwood is due their second allocation for their library at $75,000 for a total of almost $2.4 million for Beechwood.
So I like to tell stories, and Little just nudged me to tell a story. So my daughter, you know, any conversation, the best time you can ever talk to a child is in the car, because you get them confined and you can get so much information out of them, and they don't have any choice but to answer you. And of course, you take their phone from them. Well, I was asking my daughter, you know, about the move and how she was looking forward to Beechwoods. And the funny thing she said is she was looking forward to the hallways. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, well, when I come out of my room and we're changing classes, I have to put my shoulders like this and I have to put my head down and I just have to walk forward because we're getting banged around so much by other kids coming in the hallway. And it seemed like a really little thing to me or to probably any of us, but in a kid's eyes, I mean, the hallways in a middle school can be rough. And so she was most looking forward to the architectural design, I think, of Beechwoods, where it's like a natural funnel that goes smaller as you go towards the back. And as we were talking about it, I was explaining that to her, and that just kind of made her day. And it's like, it's amazing what kids pay at tools and how even the architectural design of the schools kind of responds to those very, very little needs. And so that, I just found that very interesting. I'm sorry for the sidebar.
Okay, now this is our, excuse me, our support increases and decreases that we're proposing for next year. School support instructional, a minus 10.5. That's really due to where we're having to take computer lab assistants who are support out of the computer labs, since the state's requiring us to have certified teachers in those classrooms now. So while you see a decrease here, part of the increases we looked at with the certified teachers will be those teachers going into those computer labs. Support staff special needs, 7. School support other, 11.95. That's basically housekeeper and custodial staff. For Beechwood Middle, that's net of what's transferring from Lexa Middle and Pleasant Hill Middle. That's 5.75, and then 6.2 for secretaries, secretarial assistants, bookkeepers, those types of positions across the district. And then central services support, we're proposing adding 2 positions. One is a carpenter. This was in first reading. As we continue to add to the size and number of our schools, we've not added any maintenance personnel. So we're at least requesting to add 1 carpenter position for this upcoming year. And then we need a computer technician at Beechwood Middle School is the other position. So we've kind of broken it down different ways, but this is the overall increase in staffing that we're proposing for next year. 69.1 certified and licensed professionals at $5 million. The support staff we just looked at 10.45, 437,000. We talked about the decrease of the central services administrative of 3 positions, 488,000. The addition of the school administrative staff, 1, and then the supplements, additional days, and temporary salaries. The reason that figure is different because it includes Beechwood, so it also includes supplements for the Beechwood Middle School in this figure as well. So their overall total, 77.55 positions for a total of about $5.7 million. If you remember last year, the state come out and said they were going to fund safety. Well, when they passed the budget, there was no money for safety. So we still added safety in our schools, and that's the reason we had the 4.45 mil increase last year was to fund that, since the state was not giving us any money for that. So we're adding to that layered safety. A board-certified behavioral analyst, and then we're also adding 4 additional school resource officers. This is a contracted service. 7 additional mental health counselors, $140,000 for a total of $558,000.
So for those school safety officers, during second reading, we decreased that by $20,000, but kept the same number of officers. How did you do that?
The 326,000?
Yes, sir. During first reading, it was 346,256.
I'm not sure. I'd have to look and see.
Okay.
All right. So, the state funding shortfalls. Now, we do receive money for reading coaches and nursing positions. But particularly our reading coaches, every year, that money becomes less and less that we get from the state. So for the next year, we're having to pick up an additional $64,000 for reading coaches. So basically, the way it works is the better your students do on the reading test, the less money you get. So now the total shortfall for reading coaches for the district is $617,000. The nurses, similarly, they do not fund the full amount. So for this next year, we're having to pick up an additional $41,626, and it brings that total shortfall to about $117,000. So just for next year, we're having to pick up an additional almost $106,000. This represents the state funding shortfall from mandated expenditures. Total new state revenue, $6.8 million. And the first reading you saw was based on the House version. This is based on the Senate version, which I think the House has pretty much agreed to. So mandated expenditures, the retirement increase for employer retirement, $2 million. The certified and licensed professional, 4% increase, $5.5 million. And then the certified step increase, about $2.5 million. So just in those mandated expenditures, we're short from funding from the state, $3.268 million. All right, the increases in programs and services, the additional school resource officers, this is basically adding the 4 resource officers. So we at least have a half-time SRO at each one of our elementary schools. And then $250,000 for contractual services for licensed professionals, positions such as occupational therapists, physical therapists, and psychologists. Funds to replace fee reductions in middle school. Another initiative of Dr. Little's, he wanted to reduce the amount that our parents were having to pay for fees. And we've kind of done that gradually, doing things each year. So for this year, we're reducing the amount of fees for middle schools that parents have to pay, but the schools need that money, so we're making that up by giving them an allocation to make that up. That's the $100,000. Background checks, $75,000. First of all, background checks are becoming more expensive. And then secondly, it's mainly to cover all of the volunteers that go into the school, because the last thing we want is to have somebody in our school who doesn't belong there. So, and then we have Code to the Future supplies, $49,000, and that's for our 4 elementary Code to the Future schools, which is White Knoll Elementary, Rocky Creek Elementary, New Providence Elementary, and Pillion Elementary. So a total increase of $800,000. We also had some decreases in programs and services. The first 2 were in first reading, startup supplies, and a reduction in executive leadership program. So those 2 were in the first reading. So the next 3 really came about when we went back and looked at the accounts that I mentioned earlier and trying to trim those budgets some. So utilities, maintenance, and insurance, a reduction of $359,000. Communication expenses, basically telephones, reduction of almost $60,000. And IT, a reduction of $80,000. So even though we had an increase in accounts payables of $800,000, we had a reduction in accounts payable of $734,000. So the total net increase is only about 66,000. Okay, the projected revenue changes, the first three for local, state, and the transfers all stayed the same from first reading. Now, if you look at our operational balance, for first reading, that was some $9.8 million. So for this second reading, we're reducing that to $7.9 million. Here again, reducing the overall increase in the budget to $15.2 million. And I get a lot of questions about fund balance, so I just kind of wanted to shed a little light on the importance of our fund balance, particularly as it relates to our bond ratings. So the last ratings report we got from Moody's Investors, some things that they put into their release was the AA GO rating reflects the district's sizable and growing tax base, healthy resident income levels, a strong reserve and liquidity position supported by conservative budgeting practices and formal fiscal policies. Factors that could lead to an upgrade in our rating would be a material improvement in reserve levels and balances. They also point out that things could lead in a downgrade to our rating would be operating deficits and narrowing reserve levels. So that's one of the major, if not the major thing our rating agencies look at is our fund balance. Here again, Standards & Poor's, their last rating release said the district's GO rating reflects our opinion of its continuously strong budgeting performance, maintenance of its very strong general fund reserves, and good financial management. For management, they said we consider the district's management practices good under our fiscal management assessment methodology. They say the management has formalized a reserve policy requiring the district to maintain a minimum of 7%, and we'll be increasing that to at least 10% here in the next couple of months. However, its informal target is to maintain between 16 to 17%. So the Government Finance Officers Association recommends a 16.67%, or basically a 2 months operating for a fund balance. And then for their outlook from Standards & Poor, the stable outlook reflects our expectation the district will continue to experience strong enrollment growth while displaying strong financial performances and maintaining its very strong reserve position. So on their upside scenario, all else equal, that they could raise the rating if the district's debt profile improves, accompanied with continued economic expansion and enrollment growth. What might cause to a downgrade would be we could lower the rating if the district experiences budgetary stress from future debt plans or increased expenditures due to enrollment growth, causing reserves to fall below the levels that we consider commensurate with those of similar rated peers. And then I also had Mike Gallagher and his firm, Compass Municipal, kind of do an analysis for us. So these are not my figures, they're their figures. And say, well, what if we did slip a notch? What if we went down just one notch in our rating? So it came back and said, well, basically, the finance and fund balance statistics comprise 30% of our rating. So that's how important the fund balance is. And looking at the last sale that we did, 137 million. If we would just drop one notch, that would cost us $2.6 million in additional interest. So if you extrapolate that out to the $365 million bond referendum, that means we'd pay about $7.5 million more dollars for those bonds. Yes, that's right.
Being AAA rated,
Yes.
correct? Yeah, I mean, excellent job.
Yeah, there's only, I think, I saw somewhere, I should have brought it. There's only about 4 municipalities and school districts in the state that have a AA rating. And I think a AAA might be less than 1%.
Really?
So everybody else is less than that.
So 7% state mandated,
Well, it's
or policy, I should say
mandated,
policy,
yeah.
not state, policy. We roughly run 16.5, 17, somewhere along it, or 16.5 probably.
Our unassigned fund balance right now is right about 15 point something percent.
Okay.
But if you look at our total fund balance, then it's up around 18%.
So is a slip, is that 1 point or is that 10 points? If we were to experience a slip in our fund balance to downgrade us to a single A bond rating, does that take us, or would we have to dip below 10, for example?
Would we go what now?
Would we have to dip below 10%, from 18% down to 10%? I mean,
Oh.
what's the margin that we're looking at here?
Not immediately, okay?
Sure.
But if it remained lower, yeah, then eventually we'd get to the point where we would dip below that 10% level.
So they don't look at one spot in time, they look at a consistent pattern over time.
That's right.
Okay.
Mr. Butler, didn't, my understanding, I think 2 districts just recently experienced problems with their fund balance, and I think Ms. Spearman had to try to take them over. One was Sumter County and one was up in Spartanburg, if I'm correct, because they used the wrong funds to pay for something up in Spartanburg, and I think they were going to use fund balance to reopen a middle school they had closed in Sumter, and so it put that district in financial chaos, if I read the articles correctly.
Right, and there's a accountability committee on the state that I'm a part of, and I was surprised that there are actually, this has been a few months ago when we met, but there are actually 4 districts in the state that have a negative fund balance. So basically, they're broke. And now their policy is that they will not put you on watch or warning or take over the district as long as you have at least 1 month operating, which is 8.33%. I think that's being pretty liberal to school districts. I think GFOA's recommendation is a lot more sound when looking at a fund balance. All right, we looked at this last time. This is the amount of money we're not receiving from Act 388. It's just a comparison of the amount of money we would receive from owner-occupied taxes that we're not receiving compared to the allocation we get from the state that, quote, is supposed to replace that amount. So that deficit's grown at about $4.1 million a year, and it is cumulative. So over the past 10 years or so, we have lost $209 million because of that. If you look at just last year, the $41.3 million, and then you look at what the state's not funding in EFA, which for us is about $16 million. So just in a 1 year's period, you know, that's $57 million, which means, believe it or not, we could actually reduce our millage somewhere around 200 mills if the state would fund what they're supposed to. So instead of 322 mills, we'd be down somewhere around 122, 124, somewhere like that. So, and then our expenditures go along with our revenues. Then here you see a little bit of decrease in Salaries and related costs and programs and services, increase of $15.2 million, and that represents an increase of about 5.4% in our budget. Most of our money is in salaries and related costs, almost 88%. Programs and services, about 7.5%. And then utilities and maintenance, about 4.5%. This is the same as it was for first reading. Act 388 puts a cap on the amount of millage that a school district can raise. So our current millage rate is 322 mills. So we get this allowable percentage increase from the state. So they said we can increase 4.72% under that cap. So it means we could raise as much as 15.21, the value of the mill being $282,000, which would generate approximately $4.3 million. But here again, we are not recommending a millage increase, so therefore would not generate any additional revenue in this budget. So in summary, it includes 77.55 positions for growth, includes a step increase for all eligible employees, includes a 4% increase for staff paid on the teacher's certified salary schedule, and then the new being includes a 2% increase for support staff, a 1% increase for administrative staff, and then, as before, includes funding to meet state and federal requirements, includes funding to cover required inflationary costs, and it does not include a proposed millage or tax increase for operations. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Does this include a substitute increase in pay?
No.
Are there any other questions, board?
How stable are our expenditures for the fiscal year? So are they fairly stratified across the quarters, or do we experience peaks and valleys?
The expenditures tend to be more level across the year, just because basically for teachers, we take their annual salary and divide it up evenly for each pay period.
Sure.
It's not like, well, you work 10 days in this period, so it's this amount, you work 15 in the next period, so it's this amount. It's spread out evenly. So that's fairly level. Now, our revenues, on the other hand, do go up and down, because as you expect when the tax bill goes out at the end of the year, and then they're due by January 15th, a lot of tax money comes in December, January, February, so we'll see a peak in revenue during those times. But other than that, everything's pretty stable.
So you probably run fairly short Q1, Q2, and then Q3, you have your spike, and then Q4 it comes back.
That's correct.
Okay.
And years ago, we always used to have to do TANs to even make it through those low points because of the cash flow. But we've not done that in years now.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, board? I'd like to thank Mr. Butler, and he's getting towards the last one, John. We're counting down.
Yeah, and I would like to thank my staff. They're the ones who really put all these figures together and put the rubber to the road. That's a Director of Fiscal Services, Deborah Seymour, our Controller, Donna Patton, Director of Business Services, David Cobb. Who am I leaving out? Our Payroll Supervisor, Lindsay Price. And then we also have our Procurement Director here, Jack Nichols, who was also leaving in June 30th. So I know he'll be missed in the district very much, so.
And I'd also like to acknowledge tonight, we have a lot of our principals here, and you're the first line of defense in preparing the budget. And I know Dr. Little asked that you either come to this one or June. And he said, did you notice a lot of them are here tonight because they wanted to come before school's out? So we welcome all the principals, and we really appreciate the work that goes into working with John's team and putting together this budget. It's a big, big job. So we thank y'all for all you do, and John for what you and your team do.
Thank you, and that's really true. We get a lot of support from our principals, and it's really not just the principals, it's all of our staff, students, even some of our parents, and then it just kind of comes up the line to our senior leadership team, of course, Dr. Little's leadership, and then also support from the board. We would not be able to maintain the fiscal responsibility and position we have if it was not for the support of the board. So I personally would like to thank y'all for that.
Mr. Butler, I'd like to add something here, if I may, that those of you that don't know, I retired from the school district 5 years ago and came to work here in 1997. And before I got here, our fiscal services department has been recognized for outstanding service and awarded for the last 23 consecutive years. And I think that says a lot about where we are with our finances.
Thank you.
Dr. Little?
All right, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Ms. Mary Beth Hill, we have a first reading, I believe, for policy.
So as you remember, or you may not remember, we revised board policy BE in the summer of this past summer. It replaced about 7 different pieces and parts of policies and as part of the South Carolina School Board Association recodification process. Since then, in the last month or two, you've expressed an interest in moving the starting time permanently for the board meetings from 7:30 to 7. And so this is the one change we've made to this to enable you to do that. So it's just presented to you for first reading. Make sure to let me know if you have any other changes or questions about the policy, and we'll bring it back to you in June.
I have a question. Back in March, you had said that the South Carolina School Boards Association recommends that the board not put a time in the policy. And seeing as how last week we had to call a special called board meeting just to change the
I
time.
asked them specifically if we could do without, and they said there is a statute in the law that says you should state for the whole year what your plan is. And so, if we call a special meeting that we haven't announced the whole calendar year, we can set it at whatever time we want to as we call those meetings. But when we announce, like we are doing now, one a month and then sometimes 2 a month, we do need to specify what that's going to look like. So it is easier to do it for you if we do it as one time for the whole year as part of the policy. I tried to get you out of that. I tried to get them to accept that the board would set it and give the appropriate 48 hours notice, but they said we could not do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about that policy? All right, Mr. Salters, and I will say, just to decide, our experiment was starting at 7 o'clock versus 7:30. You're not starting at a much later time, which is very exciting. So, a little operations update tonight.
All right, well, I'll be very brief, given the time of the hour, because it is still late. I just want to bring some pictures for you tonight. We have a number of projects going on across the district that are really starting to take shape. Beechwood Middle School, very excited about that school coming up. And we have some great work going on out there, and look forward to getting the board out there here soon to have a tour again of this facility. But you can see from the aerial photos that the parking lots and drive surfaces are really taking shape. And they're starting to finish up some of the fine grading around the building. And so it's really coming together. Actually, you'll see in a later shot that the rear driveway accesses there are also paved. You can see from the design here, this is the hallways that Dr. Guyton was talking about earlier. These are your student classroom wings, and they're angled to accommodate that kind of that funnel effect that he was referencing earlier. closer shot there of the front entry of the building. And this is your main entrance into the building, into the secured foyer there. Here's a shot of the center commons area with your classroom wings in this picture are on the left, and then media center's on your right, and then you would continue down the hallway to your cafeteria space. Down to the right would be the gymnasium and theater area. Second story, see the hand railings have been installed, ready for carpet and floor finishes there. Here's the gymnasium. I'm really excited to get the bingle up on the scoreboard. And we see some school colors represented. We have our bleachers in and our Carolina blue, I think is what they call it, trim there on the
I've heard that's the color. I don't know.
on the basketball goal there.
It's sky blue.
Sky blue. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And apparently, there we go. This is the cafeteria space. You can see the terrazzo flooring has been polished in this area, and they're finishing up some finish there. We're scheduled for a DHEC inspection here in the next couple of weeks, and we'll get our kitchen ready to serve our students. Closer shot of that, the serving equipment is installed. Will soon be cleaned and prepped for use. This is a picture of the upper play field area. This is where they'll do some PE, kickball, softball activities, things like that. And then another shot of the courtyard area. You're actually looking at the media center here on the left, cafeteria space back here on the right. And then the rear entry for the buses. This is the bus loop. There'll be a canopy along the right-hand wall there, picture there, and drive and a turnaround down here at the end of the building. Excited to show some pictures tonight of the new Pelion Middle School groundbreaking. We had an event. It was kind of a whirlwind event. Appreciate the board's attendance at that. We did 2 groundbreakings in one morning. Thankfully, it was not as hot as it has been this week or will be this week. We had some students out there with shovels and very excited to start turning some dirt and Pelion at the relocation of that campus. Here's an aerial shot of that activity going on. We've started doing some clearing on that property, and you'll really start to see some bigger changes there here in the near future.
Mr. Oswald, please notice they did not use the after photo where you and I moved the most dirt. They used the before.
Yeah, there was a big hole here we had to go back and fill in. Also very excited to break ground at Centerville Elementary School. And we had a number of ambitious students that I think would have probably given you guys a run for your money. They were very disappointed that I had to take their shovels and get them back on a bus to school. But it was a great effort that day, and really excited to bring that activity to Gilbert. And here's another shot of that. We're a little bit further along in the permitting process on this school than at Pelion at the time, so the contractor was able to kind of get started mobilizing, and consequently we have some significant progress on that site. You see the significant clearing has occurred. This is the first classroom wing, the front of the school. This is our prototype X plan that we build for elementaries. And so you can see the beginnings of that classroom wing, and then another classroom wing coming off this way, and there'll be one here as well and one back over here. So it's really starting to take shape. We're very pleased with the progress. They'll actually have this building pad ready May 31st. So super excited about that being on schedule and progressing. That school will actually open in August of this coming year. So we're really excited about that happening. So any questions about those projects? All right, thank you very much.
I guess I'd like to apologize to Ryan Poole, as he and the team are getting ready to present and Van Bauer is going to present our strategic plan. And nothing gets you fired up at 9:30 at night, just like a strategic plan. I know y'all are excited. It's okay. Settle down. We're going to get there. They'll be up here in a second. This year, and I'm just going to intro this briefly and not try to step on any toes, steal their thunder. This has been our first year. If you'll recall, last year we adopted our more of a flexible and adaptable strategic plan. this was our first year of implementation, and we're going to talk about what that has looked like over the course of this year. And while some of our standardized data doesn't come back until, I guess, September, October-ish, and maybe even November, it just depends on how late they are with that data, the conversation we begin to have is, really standardization, that standardized data doesn't represent everything that has taken place as part of our strategic plan. So we wanted to show you some different data points tonight that we're also really excited about and the work that we've been doing. So take it away.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Little, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for having us here tonight to talk about our strategic plan. We're ending our first year of a 3-year plan, and this first graphic just simply illustrates the components of the plan. You can see at the top we have our mission and vision, surrounded by performance goals and action plans. In the middle, you have our system commitments, or if you will, our promises as to what we're going to make priorities over this next 3 years. Number one is that students advance on time and are prepared for life outside of Lexington 1. 2 is that we teach power skills, which we gathered lots of input from our community in terms of what successful students need in the workforce. We also have number 3, in which we focus on having schools that are service-oriented and that we develop strong partnerships with our community. And number 4 is that we equip all of our teachers and staff members with the necessary resources that they need to be strong advocates for children. So that's more or less the structure of how our strategic plan is set up. And as Dr. Little said, this is not a presentation that will deliver lots of academic data in terms of test scores and that sort of thing, because that will come certainly in the fall when all those things return. But this will allow you to get a glimpse of our working plan. And as part of our plan, we need to monitor and make sure that we're measuring our impact over these next 3 years. And some of the ways that we do that is through our school support meetings, which I'll talk about in just a minute, our state accountability measures, our district dashboard, which is very unique to our school district. Lots of great work on that comes out of Dr. Phillips' office. Our strategy and action team, which is a team of central service leaders that focus on communicating the strategic plan and training our principals and our assistant principals. Our district leadership team, on-site supports from Mr. Poole and myself. We work very closely with all of our principals, giving them on-site support, talking through their plans, setting goals with those folks. And also we have groups of principals that form critical friends groups, and we get important information and problem solve with those groups as well. As I mentioned before, the school support meetings are extremely important, and we established those this year. And we have had tremendous feedback from all of our schools about the way these support meetings are set up. And this is kind of an overarching component to our plan, and this is the way that our central service leaders actually get into the schools and hear reports from our principals and their school leadership team, so we know exactly what their goals are, what their needs are, and we bring teams out to these meetings all year long, and those teams adjust accordingly to the needs of the school. And you can see that in these meetings, we have school-led dialogue, and we try to get specific to the student level because we want to know about what's happening with each and every student, because our vision is empower each child to design the future. So if we're serious about each child, we have to examine subgroups, and we have to really understand what's going on in the school and what the needs are. Just to give you some numbers here, we had 72 school strategic plan support meetings this year, 31 in the fall, 31 in the spring, and 10 in the winter. And so the way that breaks down is that if you are a Title I school or you're a school with a new principal, you have 3 meetings. So that accounts for the winter meetings. So now I'll turn it over to Mr. Poole, and he will carry you through some action plans.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. So this plan, as we've talked about all along, was a very different kind of plan than what we've seen in the past. So I think our last plan submitted 5-6 years ago was 83 pages. This is a 6-page plan, and it's built to be adaptive over the next 3 years. But it does drill down to 6 specific performance goals. So we said, how do you turn that vision and the mission and those promises that we make through the system commitments to life in the schools? So we set 6 performance goals that have action plans, and we wanted to just tell some of the stories of what we're seeing emerge through the years without final state accountability data coming up. And as we started to list all the examples of how we're seeing evidence that the performance goals are coming to life, I mean, we could be here all night, but I've already gotten a lot of looks from the principals. So we're going to highlight just some examples from elementary and high school, and the yellow arrows on these slides kind of point to we're still looking at where we want to grow in year 2. So this year, if it was an implementation year, that performance goal 1 was around increasing the percentage of students who are progressing on time with the skills they need to be successful at the next level. Some of the things that we saw were an implementation of a really consistent instructional framework in literacy and numeracy, which was one of the areas that we said we wanted to really target. And what are the reading and math skills that we're seeing at pre-K, at 3rd grade, at 6th grade, at 10th grade? And so looking at an instructional model that not only focuses on the adults, but how are we reaching every child in the room? And for the board, when you've been on school visits, I think at the elementary and middle and high school level, you've seen some examples of this, the teachers pulling small groups and pushing in intervention models to really reach all kids for their goals and what they need. So that's some of the examples that we've seen come to life. We've seen stronger coaching cycles in our building, and the numbers of cycles that we're seeing through digital learning coaches and instructional coaches and leadership coaching and assistant principal coaching. Everybody's talking about how to do their craft better to reach kids, and it's a very student-centered conversation. At LTC and across the 5 high schools, we're reaching levels of industry certification in college and career readiness that are really demonstrating that students are advancing with the skills they need to be successful at the next level. And across our district, students are coming out with 2,500 industry certifications this year, ready to go into the workforce or apply to college at Midlands Tech or in industry or the military. And we saw some celebrations of that yesterday as well at River Bluff with our military signees. So it's really not about just one end goal for everybody, but a celebration of all kids advancing with what they need for the next level. So performance goals 2 and 3 were about the state asks every district across the state to look at how you're serving students who are showing signs of giftedness or needs for acceleration. And we looked at a couple of goals in this area, one around increased enrollment and access in classes that are what the state's now calling advanced learning opportunities. These tend to be accelerated honors, IB, AP courses, and dual enrollment now. And we have continued to grow that over the past few years, but this year particularly, we were looking at access, and we've increased the number of requests, and we've got over 5,000 requests for advanced learning opportunities in the high schools next year from over 2,000 individual students. That's an increase in students of poverty by over 100 kids requesting classes for next year. And we've got a 15% increase of historically underrepresented groups requesting advanced learning opportunities in our school through our efforts, and we expect to see that grow and grow through the years. So performance goal 4 is about improving the conditions that lead to success. There's a variety of things happening across our schools. So you see a real focus on advocacy. And we presented maybe 2 months ago on middle school scheduling, where all the middle schools are looking at the social emotional needs of their students and building in this advocacy period times to really reach out and see it's not just maybe the academic interventions we need, but we've got to know who you are as a whole person. So the school schedule is taking that into account, and schools are from elementary all the way up to high school are talking to teachers about how do we support you and fill that commitment to give you the skills you need to advocate for all students. We see structures like CREW, we see impact at White Knoll High School, we see restorative practices and assistant principals. We've got 30 assistant principals that participated in professional learning this year around the relationship between relationships and management in the school to try to think of different ways to reach out to get students to be successful. And to help support all students. So we have Project Hope, and that's made a difference in the way we talk about students, and Mr. Caldwell's talked about throughout the year, and there are plans for the next phases of that going into next year. But the way that we're talking about student success and what it means to make all kids visible every day in every school has changed, we think, through the course of this strategic plan. And it's been a real success, and you see that in individual stories of students every day. So Mr. Bauer's going to talk about, I think, the last couple of performance goals, and we're going to wrap up.
So performance goal 5 has to do with our professional learning and our high quality professional learning opportunities for teachers. The cornerstone of that would be our model classrooms that we've implemented this year to focus on the workshop model in ELA and math. We have model classrooms and lab sites set up in our elementary, middle, and high schools. We have 18 model classrooms, K-12, 2 per grade level, and K-5, 1 per grade, and 6 through 8, and 2 at the high school level. We have 119 model classroom visits. We have 17 elementary schools that have at least one team doing a lab site visit. And just to differentiate between the two, we have model classrooms set up where teachers can actually go in and visit a teacher who is highly skilled with the workshop model, and they can have hands-on learning. But at our lab sites, teams of teachers can go in and study with a highly skilled person, and then they can go in the classroom with students and practice the craft. So again, these are practices that we've implemented this year with great success. I think that every principal in here would tell you, and teachers will tell you, that this is a really worthwhile experience.
One of the, I think the innovative practices there is that we've redefined what it means to have professional learning. You know, normally you just kind of roll out there and, you know, there was an old joke about dying during a professional development, nobody knowing the difference kind of thing. And you know, what I like about these professional learning opportunities is that they involve kids. And so they've really mixed kids in with the professional learning. So you're going to see it while children are participating, or you go see it and then you participate with kids and practice the skills. And so that's really a new take on professional development. I think it's taken us a long time to get there, but we have really embraced that. And I think that's been probably our most popular model, or certainly one of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have in our schools, in terms of math, we haven't progressed quite as far in math, but we're continuing to work on building those sites. So we have 11 model classrooms, K through 8, 7 elementary, 4 middle, And we've had 34 model classroom visits this year. And we're also in the process of setting up lab sites across the district in math as well. Just to mention a few other high leverage strategies, reading recovery is a intensive strategy for students in first grade. It's a short-term intervention that we use, and it has to be administered by a highly trained teacher. And we're pleased to have 13 new teachers in training for next year. 11 will be working on full certification, and 2 will be doing early literacy strand. We've implemented at Deerfield Elementary, Pillion Elementary, Oak Grove, Lexington Elementary, Rocky Creek, and we continue to expand and implement at Meta Glen Elementary, Red Bank, White Knoll, and this just continues to grow. We also have training sites where we have behind the glass training where teachers can actually work on their skill and be observed behind the glass, and this is just a really important strategy in terms of reading recovery. So again, high leverage strategy with great success. The other thing in terms of professional learning that we're seeing is increased collaboration among regular education teachers, interventionists, special ed teachers, 4K teachers. Never before have we seen this kind of collaboration and working together for student success. So we're really proud of that as well. Also, our Teacher Leadership Council has gotten involved and revised collaborative planning times for teachers, giving more flexibility for collaboration across schools, across subjects, and also we have made some changes in the instructional fair model. They've implemented a collaborative time in the morning during that day, as well as some high quality professional learning in the afternoon. We also have several cohorts for endorsements for teachers. We have Read to Succeed Literacy, teacher add-ons, certifications. We have 49 teachers doing that through Converse College. Teachers of Children of Poverty add-on certification, 18 teachers through Francis Marion University, and English to speakers of other languages, 24 teachers through the University of South Carolina. So we just keep getting better and better in the high quality learning we're providing for our teachers. And then our last goal is Performance Goal 6, and this is implementing strategies to improve customer service, parent engagement, and community involvement. And I truly believe that we shine in this area. We have so many community engagement things going on. There's too numerous to mention, but just a few to highlight would be showcases in the town of Pillion with the Pillion schools, wonderful event that they do every year. I see Mr. Nelson here. Gilbert High School has a showcase there to involve their communities. We have 3,400 middle school students who have job shadowed, 200 plus youth apprenticeships. In 2019, we had groundhog job shadows for middle grades, 2,720 students off-site, 584 virtual shadowing, 209 other extended learning opportunities for a total of 3,513 students getting those kinds of job shadowing experiences. So I could go on, but I imagine looking at some of these faces, you don't want to stay here too much longer. So that kind of sums up that goal.
So as we move forward, there are some questions that we're asking ourselves all along the way with the implementation. And it's not just, are we seeing the plans come to life in action, but specifically what strengths are we seeing from this first year of implementation, and lifting up what are the artifacts and examples What do we see in the environments in the schools? What are the changes that we're seeing for kids to indicate that we're moving in the right direction? What areas need additional support or attention or emphasis to make the plan come to life across this short 3-year plan that was designed to be adaptive? So we're constantly kind of gauging the artifacts to see what's working and what's not. What actions by our adults are going to sustain the strengths that we're seeing for the students, and what actions by the adults in the system are going to address the areas that we're seeing in need. So these are the questions that we're entering year 2 with, and as we get more data coming back from different measures, we'll be continuing to flex and adapt to be that agile system that we plan to be. That last picture was the funnel of how we turn the big vision into action on the ground for kids. And we see that in 1,000 different ways in our schools, and we see it paying off for the students, and we're continuing to have those conversations. So we appreciate the time, and we're here for any questions that you have tonight or in the future.
Any questions, board?
Can you repeat the number about the children taking high-level classes?
So we have
children of poverty and children of underrepresented populations?
Yeah, we have right around 5,000 requests going into next year for advanced learning opportunities, so IB, AP, or dual enrollment. Over 2,000 kids making those 5,000 requests. So there was about 115 additional students that are classified in poverty that will be in those classes across the high schools next year, and that's just as we are right now, not even knowing exactly which dual enrollment will be available, but those requests will continue to grow. It's a 15% increase in students historically underrepresented in classes. So over the course of 1 year, we're pretty pleased to see that, we hope to see a gain, and it's double digits. So that's encouraging for us. And that's the idea, to get into rigorous college readiness coursework at the high school level and the right supports to show that everybody can do this, whether you go to a 4-year college, a 2-year college, or into industry. It's giving the kind of high expectations and skills that we want to see. So the strategies are working, at least in terms of the requests that we've had. And I want to say that Van and I talk a lot about the strategic plan, but I'm glad our principals are here tonight, because we just kind of said, hey, what are we going to do with these plans and these ideas? And they've turned it into reality. And that's when we go to the school support meetings and talk about, so how do the commitments come to life? And they show us and they tell us and they generate ideas. So they are like superstars.
Thank you very much.
Anything else, Dr. Little?
I know that you're sad about it, but I believe that I am done for the evening.
Okay. Well, I just want to share with you a few of the things that your board's been involved with since our last meeting, and I have to honestly say it's probably one of the most special things I've ever attended, and it was new. As of yesterday, we did a military signing day. We had 43 of our young men and young women who have signed to join a branch of the military. We had the most wonderful event to celebrate them. And I want to give accolades to Representative Wooten and to Representative Calhoun. They helped put that together along with Dr. Little and our principals. It was just a fabulous day. And man, you talk about something that was moving. Then Mr. Hearn invited us to the Future Farmers of America, and that is always one of my favorite events in Pillion. I never miss it. I try my best not to. And he just had a wonderful group of kids out there this year. In fact, I was telling him I got real teary-eyed when they unzipped that blue jacket and hung it over that fence, because I think they just hated to leave their friends and go on to college. Mr. Candillo invited us for Coding to the Future over at New Providence, and oh my, so wonderful. I had one little guy, he was coding a house. He couldn't get it to work. He was in 3rd grade. He turned around to me and he said, "Give me just a minute and I will solve this problem." And gave him about a minute and he fixed it and he built that little house. So Mr. Anderson and Ms. Green got to attend our graduation for students with special needs last Friday. I was so sad I was out of town, and I think that was a wonderful event.
That one is always wonderful. I mean, it really hits you.
Yeah, it's great. And then Miss Green last night joined Mr. Nelson over at Gilbert High School for their celebrations of learning, and she said it was phenomenal, and she was so impressed with your students. And in the morning at 8:30, we will be with Miss Nichols celebrating Rocky Creek's coding to the future. So thank y'all, and we just appreciate the invitations y'all extend to us and letting us see these kids in action. So thank you for that. And board items 12.0 are items for board information, and I think we have this straightened out. We had somebody retire and somebody new take it on, and it was just I don't know, but it's been fixed, so that's good. And then 13.0 is adjournment, and board, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second? Second. Mr. Guyton, all in favor, please stand up. Thank you.